Good afternoon. Our next speaker, Major George Filer, spent over 20 years in the United States Air Force as an intelligence officer, and he accumulated 5,000 flying hours. He currently serves as the Eastern Regional Director for the Mutual UFO Network. He is the publisher of the wildly popular Filer's Files. If you haven't subscribed to it, I would highly recommend it. Because with that being said, it is my pleasure and honor to bring to the stage Major George Filer.
It's hard to see up here. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I'd like to think that the audience that listens to me are some of the finest people in the world and some of the smartest. Is that right? Well, I'll say we agree. I'm going to start out why I got interested in UFOs, basically, other than seeing them as a child in the Air Force when I was flying. That's me when I was a little bit younger, flying tankers over England. We were told that the fighters had a bad habit of not coming back when they chased the UFOs, and they thought that it would be safer for the tankers to chase them away because we didn't have any weapons on board, and they didn't seem to return the fire on anybody who, only if they were attacked would they return the fire. In any case, London Control picked up a UFO while we were over the sea just off the coast of Norfolk, and asked us if we would actually intercept a bogey that was about 1,000 feet high and over the center of England. It was about here over Stonehenge area. And we started descending down to some 1,000 feet. We're up at about 33,000 feet, and as we flew down, we passed the red line in the aircraft, which means we were going too fast. We had to slow down. And I often wonder if crews chasing UFOs often exceed the speed limit, so to speak, and destroy their own aircraft, because it's an exciting situation. Now, on our radar, we picked up a huge radar return out about 50 miles. And if you take off from England, one of the largest radar returns is the Firth of Forth Bridge in Scotland. And this is a picture of the bridge. It's about a mile long. And the radar return from the bridge was almost exactly the same as the radar return from the UFO over the center of England, except that it was flying, which gives you an idea of the size of the craft that was there and why they wanted us to chase it away, basically. It was over Stonehenge area, Oxford, Stonehenge area, just kind of floating around there. It's interesting, at that part of the world, on the ground, there's what's called curses, which exactly match the shape and size of the UFOs, or the motherships. This is about what it looked like, only it was off in the distance. We saw a bunch of lights on it. It was actually at night. It looked like a cruise ship at sea, or an aircraft carrier, or something like that. And as we got about a mile away, it went up into space, pretty much like the shuttle launches at night. Apparently, it looked something like this, actually in space. This is a drawing, so to speak, of it. The interesting part of this is a couple of weeks after we had landed, we got an invitation to a dining in with Prince Philip as a speaker. And Prince Philip asked to see the air crews and sit with the air crews, and we sat around with those who had chased UFOs telling our stories. And I told Prince Philip pretty much the story I just told you, and asked him why he was interested in UFOs. And he said that his uncle, Lord Mountbatten, had seen them up close in Asia, and that because his uncle had seen them and believed in them, he himself believed in them. And because he believed in them and Earl Mountbatten believed in them, I believed in them. Now, what's interesting about this is that, in other words, I had it confirmed besides seeing it and having it on radar, when two of the great men of the world are convinced that UFOs exist, that convinced me. Now, NASA satellite photos also see UFOs. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is a NASA satellite photo of pretty much what we saw, and this is taken from space. And seeing this photo got me interested in the fact that these UFOs must come from somewhere. Well, one of the likely places that they come from is Mars. And so we started looking at satellite photos from Mars. Now, when we checked with NASA and some of the top people there, they said that images do not show evidence of anything living or formally living on Mars. And the pictures you see that look like people or animals or plants or buildings or whatever are misinterpreted. They're just kind of light or projection and two-dimensional. In other words, NASA says there's nothing there. So I'd like you to consider that in my briefing, that NASA and JPL feel that there's nothing significant on Mars. Now, I didn't do this by myself. I didn't evaluate all these thousands of pictures by myself. This group of men and others have done a great deal of the work, so to speak. And much has been sent to me by Dr. Tom Van Flandert and Dr. John Brandenburg and Sir Charles Schultz and Norman Bryden and Richard Buckley. And the group goes on, and Joe Skipper and so on. Well, in any case, there's a lot of people that have looked at these images on Mars, and you can go on your own home computer, so to speak, and look up Mars and JPL and the European Space Agency. In any case, the images are there, and you can look at them. Here's the protoplanet, so to speak, essentially at this time being formed, and the size of Earth versus Mars. As you can see, we're much smaller. Mars has about 38% of the gravity of Earth. So anything coming from Mars, taking off from Mars, only needs, you might say, 38% of the propulsion capability. Now, Mars goes around, so to speak, and comes as close as 78 million miles and as far out as 378 million miles. People don't think of it, but planets all through history for millions of years have been hit by meteorites. It's not really safe in the, so to speak, on Earth or on Mars. And Mars particularly has lots of problems because it's near the asteroid belt. And there's two moons on Mars, Phobos and Deimos, Fear and Terror. Mars is kind of interesting in that it has the largest volcano in the solar system. Maybe in the universe, but we don't know what's exactly out there. But we do know there's some 1,200 planets outside of our solar system. And here we have Olympus Mons, which is 88,000 feet tall, much higher than the mountains all around Earth. And here it is again. It's some 30 miles wide. And this shows the sun, the Venus and so on, and Mars. I don't know if you can see Earth and Mars and the asteroid belt and Jupiter. In any case, they feel that there was some kind of an explosion on the asteroid belt in the past, and they have evidence of that at Saturn with this bright area on the moon Lapidus. And on Mars itself, there's indications of a huge explosion, and even to some extent to one on Earth, that it's not really safe in their solar system throughout history. This shows you some of the deep valleys that occurred there, the Valles Marinas Canyon hit by a moon or an asteroid. It's some 2 to 8 kilometers deep, and it's 5,000 miles long, or 5,000 kilometers long. There was a huge ocean. Roughly half the planet had ocean on it, Malacandrian Ocean. And this is a map of the elevation showing the area where the ocean existed. Now, one of the things that happened to Mars is there's about nuclear holocaust about 180 million years ago. And they don't know exactly what happened. There's no real deep holes on Mars indicating that was a natural phenomenon. It was more likely a war on Mars between civilizations. It's kind of interesting that the aliens who come here keep on warning us against wars, nuclear type particularly. And one of the things they found about Mars is that it's very cold, like you've all always heard, but what you probably did not hear, that in the summer the temperature gets warm. It gets up to 81 degrees or so on the soil. Consequently, during the summer, liquid water can flow. Going back to the turn of the century, about 1890 or so, the astronomers got their new telescopes and they're looking at Mars and they're making drawings of what they see there. And Schiaparelli, the astronomer from Italy, decided that he could see canali. And this was interpreted as canals, and people around the world felt that there was canals on Mars. And possibly there is. We'll show something that could be called canals later. An American, Percival Lowell, wrote a book about Mars and told people that there was canals on Mars and that these canals took the water from the poles and moved them into the cities on Mars, and that there were, in fact, cities there. But since then, scientists have said that that is not a fact. But there's some indication that maybe there is cities there. One of the things that we find on Mars is a lot of craters from the meteorites from the asteroid belt hit the country and hit the Mars land's surfaces. And this is one that's kind of a crazy one. It's a square crater. It's thought that maybe somebody did some digging and made it square. Another interesting thing is there's plenty of pyramids on Mars. Here's one right next to this crater, and then you can see it blown up there. We also have craters that have bullseyes on them, one next to each other that look like a bullseye. Now, this gentleman is an acquaintance of mine, Dr. Gilbert Levin, believed to have found life on Mars. Now, you probably didn't hear about it, but he devised some experiments to take to Mars with the Viking landers in 1976 that would test for life. And basically invented this highly sensitive method and called the label released experiment. And what they would do is squirt a drop of radioactive food into a tiny cup of Martian soil and monitor the air above the soil to detect the radioactive gas. In any case, the radioactive gas detected microorganisms on Mars at two places, two Viking landers, 4,000 miles apart. He stands by his discoveries that life exists on Mars and did in 1976. And he's even more convinced that, in fact, it was there and found. Now, science had trouble with coming up with a concept that there was life on Mars and kind of said, no, there was some kind of geological problem or whatever. There was many excuses made, but Dr. Levin and his people stand by the fact that they found life on Mars. Part of the way to show that there was life on Mars is to look at some of the Viking lander images. For example, this one is a Big Joe, and it has moss on it, kind of an algae and moss and so on growing green. Now here's a Hubble telescope picture of Mars in February. And if you notice at the top there's the North Pole, and it's quite large. Well, as the seasons go on in the spring and so on, the pole melts. At the time that it melts in the spring, Mars starts turning green. You can get out with your telescope and see this. Every spring, Mars turns green, so to speak. And that's this moss and algae and other vegetation growing there, which would indicate life, obviously. Here's a close-up of some of the moss growing. And we have melting of the ice, and we're not sure exactly what these are, possibly trees growing or just the melting of the side of the ice. Now, one picture that we found on Mars was actually found by Dr. Buckley. And this particular one shows an area 55 miles long showing some kind of track on Mars, like a vehicle was on there. And we have seen what appeared to be vehicles. And here's a close-up of the track, maybe turning around. A lot of these markings lead to an area called Cydonia. And Cydonia is famous, that probably everyone here has seen pictures of Cydonia, at least the famous face on Mars. He's up here in the right-hand corner. And that would indicate that there's some kind of life there that somebody built in the distant past. This picture of a person that looks kind of human. I've seen a few people out in the audience kind of look like this guy. Any case, here's another shot of Cydonia area with the face on the right, a place called the Fort. Here's the fort. There's several pyramids in the area. And we suspect, but we don't know, that this area was hit by some kind of a nuclear weapon, and maybe that's why it looks a little bit old and in bad shape. In any case, that's an area that appears to have been a city at one time, or at least some kind of a religious area. Here's the face that most of you have seen up close. And it does show, two eyes, a mouth, lips, even some teeth. A friend of mine, Dr. Tom Van Flandern, who unfortunately has passed away, worked at the U.S. Naval Observatory, and these are his conclusions regarding the face, that the natural origin hypothesis is disproved at odds of 1,000 billion to 1. It's pretty good odds. The artificiality of Cydonia is established beyond a reasonable doubt. I think his conclusions are correct. Now, I'm showing you a lot of images from satellite, and in the Air Force I got used to looking at them. These images are 3 pyramids in Giza in Cairo, Egypt. And in other words, you get the same similar idea of what the pyramids look like from space. Cairo, interestingly, means Mars. And it appears that the Egyptians feel some connection with Mars. And I think maybe we all have some connection with Mars. This is the pyramid near the face of Mars, and it's 1.25 miles high. Obviously, their pyramids are much larger than ours, which run about 80 stories high. Another view of the D&M pyramid. They're very similar to pyramids in Mexico as well. The pyramids of the sun and the moon, and not far from Mexico City. Now here's another view of the Cydonia area, and we have this another face that looks kind of like the Egyptian Ramses. We'll see a lot of faces that look similar to Egyptian faces, and wear Egyptian helmets similar to what they have on Mars. Here's a picture of the fort. It's thought to have been a fort in the past. It's given that name. We have a hexagon crater in the lower left side there. And I don't know if you can see it, but what we often find where there's interesting places on Mars, there's also writing. I don't know if you can make out the writing there, but for whatever reason, the letters E and Y and Z and G and so on that we recognize as, English writing are often seen on Mars. Here's the crater seen up close, the hexagon crater. There's no natural reason to have a hexagon for a crater, so it is odd in itself. And we're comparing, you might say, natural formations against man-made or Martian-made formations. One of the things they've done, particularly the Soviets, sent in infrared satellites that could detect heat. And these satellites detected heat in various places in Mars. Also, right over Sardonia, underground, there seems to be heat coming up, which would indicate that there's some kind of life or furnaces or something going on underground. Some kind of heating is being shown on our infrared satellites. Again, the shot of the D&M pyramid, and we're not sure what these are, but they seem to be some kind of a structure and not natural. Here's a close-up of the South Pole, and as I mentioned before, it melts. So there's indication that the Martians realize that there's melting going on, and they have to capture the water. This is a crater near the South Pole, and I don't know if you can see down here in the bottom, but there's like a dam, and the dam collects the water coming off the side of the crater. There's a lot of water underground, a whole underground system of water and oxygen. It flows down into the bottom of the crater and is collected and pumped out. Then it's put into huge tubes. And some of these tubes are hundreds of feet wide, wider than football fields and so on. And the tubes are move generally from the poles, away from the poles toward the equator, apparently carrying water and possibly being a transportation system. I'll show you a series of these tubes, and they're made in different ways. But I had this particular picture that was kind of startling, and I called JPL, and I said to the gentleman that was in charge of tubes, so to speak, what were they? And he said, well, they're sand dunes. And I said, well, I spent 3 months flying over Saudi Arabia, anywhere from 50 feet to a few hundred feet, and I've seen thousands of miles of sand dunes, and those don't look like sand dunes to me. That sand dunes look more like waves in the ocean. The wind blows, and it creates this wave effect in the sand dunes. And they're pretty much standard and parallel to each other. And these are changing directions. And the wind blows the sand dunes, causing the appearance. And this is changing direction in multiple directions, and it just doesn't make sense that the wind would blow, first one way and then the other. In any case, I don't think they're sand dunes. He got very angry at me. I suggested that he get in a plane and fly over some sand dunes, and it might be helpful. There's lots of different ones here that we'll show you. There's quite interesting, and I don't think they're natural formations. That's my decision, and that's Joseph Skipper's belief as well, who actually gave me this particular photograph. There's indications that underground cities exist. Some is on the surface, but not everything. Here's a broken tube. And they also spread out and go underground, almost like something like subways or railroads, and this one looks like it has light shining up through it, or else light is from the sun is bouncing off of it. The average one is 200 foot wide, about 200 foot diameter. but many in certain locations become much larger, 300, 500, 600 feet in diameter. And some, like this one, this is one of the largest one, is thought to be 2 miles in diameter. In other words, you could put a whole city underneath it. And this is the tube. A lot of the tubes you can't see, you know, they're running underground, and for whatever reason, the sand blew off of them or whatever, but they show. But they definitely show, you know, roundness and seem to show something inside of them. This is an artist. Matter of fact, I made this drawing. That's my artist rendition of what they're like. The astronomers 100 years ago were probably seeing these tubes and calling them canals. In a way, they are canals. And that some of these tubes join into what we'd like to call cities. Particularly about 30 degrees south, there's a whole series of city-like structures like this. This again shows a crater with water coming out of it. That's fairly common, that you find these craters with this water system that's running under the surface. And there's a lot more oxygen in the land that's generally realized. Also, there's actually flowing water on there. This ecostasma comes from the North Pole and appears to have flowing water in it. This is a European Space Agency picture, both last one and this one, and this is a close-up of it. And within the red arrows, it shows water actually flowing. And then nearby is some moss or vegetation, a kind of green area here. And I don't know if you notice these perfect circles look like metal. I'm not sure what they do, but they would indicate some kind of life on Mars. Somebody built something along the way. Another European Space Agency picture that indicates water on Mars. And another European Space Agency picture. If you notice, they seem to be more willing to show water on Mars than a lot of the release that NASA has. Their satellite also has more color than ours. Now we are sending up new satellites, so we'll probably get better pictures. Again, possibly trees growing. We don't know what the vegetation looks like on Mars, obviously, for sure. These are kind of cactus-like things. It's kind of dry and cold, and probably only growing is done in the summer, kind of like in Alaska or whatever. Pine trees, like objects, vegetation. Here's kind of cactus-like vegetation. And certainly evidence of deep gullies and so on made by water traveling across the countryside. There's a lot of evidence of water and even floods on Mars. Joe Skipper sent me this particular object, which is kind of interesting, that he feels that there's a dome, a glass dome, over this picture. I don't personally see the dome, but there's some reflections that he sees that might indicate a dome. And he has much better quality images than we have looking here, in the millions of pixels and so on, and consequently you can pick up a lot more than we can. But you get the general idea that there's a dome with a very brightly lighted interior. It appears that there's a lot of mining going on Mars. We don't know if that's done by Martians or aliens, or if we're going there and doing it. But in any case, somebody's there doing it. Here's another mining manufacturing plant, which is right near the equator on Mars. And obviously it's warmer on the equator, so you have a better ability to mine and dig into the soil and so forth. There's a lot of, sounds funny, but rust on Mars. That's why it's kind of red. The oxygen created rust through the air, through thousands of years, and the land looks rusty, frankly. But there are plenty of various kinds of minerals on Mars that it would be worth mining. Here's another parent plant, and I don't know if you can see this area up here, but this looks like a gun is spraying water, or possibly used in gold mining. We don't know what the liquid is, but it's being sprayed out rather far distance. This is like a mile or so. One NASA scientist, Dr. Joy Crisp from Princeton University, feels that there probably has been life on Mars. So not all scientists agree with each other. And frankly, a lot of scientists are starting to go along with our concept that there is life. Here's some odd-looking parallel structures on Mars, bridge-like structure. In nature, you don't normally see this kind of a situation. And here's something odd, a radome. I don't know if it has radar in it, but it is a radome on Mars that looks like it was made by Martians or aliens or whatever. Now there's another, you might call, famous city besides Cydonia. There's Elysium, and it has faces as well, and pyramids and a sphinx and writing. Again, you see that letter Y. There's some belief that the Y means God, but again, the area may just be old, or it was actually damaged in a nuclear war or whatever. This is a close-up again by European Space Agency, and it shows some of the pyramids. Now, one of the reasons to have pyramids is if you're getting hit by meteorites, they tend to bounce off the meteor. So in any case, they have a purpose, as well as looking nice, that kind of thing. And we don't know exactly why the Martians decided to build pyramids, but they may have brought that expertise here. The other two pyramids at Elysium, one up close. And all over Mars, wherever you see cities or anything of interest, so to speak, pyramids or so on, there's usually writing. And interestingly enough, it almost looks like English. In this case, we're not sure exactly what it says, but it looks like sick, S-I-C-K. Anybody sick? I don't know. One interesting thing about Mars is they've been testing, and they found that in the summer there's a tremendous amount of methane. They estimate 180,000 tons of methane. Well, methane is created in a couple ways by volcanoes. To our knowledge, there's no actual volcanoes that are operating on Mars at this time. As far as that goes, Mars is pretty dead as far as volcanic activity is concerned. But the other way to create methane is through vegetation, through plants and the like. And so it looks like that moss and vegetation is really there, that there's life there, that it's creating all this methane. Here's one of the typical shots showing what could be vegetation, what could be a river, and some tubes as well. Again, there's a lot of areas that look like they're evergreen forests. Our evergreen forests grow in, where there's snow and so on, so they could grow on Mars. This is banyan-like trees. Arthur C. Clarke saw this particular picture, and he lives in Ceylon, and he said it's just like they're banyan trees, and that this pretty much convinced him that there's life on Mars, and it's one of those pictures that's convincing me that it's there. We're not sure what these are, but they're kind of interesting, little shelters or whatever, but they don't look natural in any case. And here's some structures at the bottom of this shot that have a certain amount of interest. And time for the football season, so they have their stadium. And we can't quite make this out. I don't know if it's the Jets or LA or what it is, but it looks like an FXAG or something like that. It does look like a stadium to us. Another thing that we find is huge, what you might call animals, like made in the ground. It's almost like their big advertising sign, you know, buy your Puma today. And in any case, somebody would have to fly over to see it, something like the Nazca lines down in Peru, you know, where you see all these different pictures of animals and things, and something like that is on Mars. Here we have a ramp and a structure and rectangular openings that do not seem natural. And one of the things we find at various places, what it looks like where smoke has been coming out of the ground, probably where there's a city or, you know, some kind of structures underneath the ground, and then the heat comes out and creates smoke, and after a time it creates these dark spots, something like that's on your chimneys and so on. And these are fairly common around Mars, indicating that life does live underground. I like to call this guy Noah. He's kind of a funny-looking guy. I don't know if you can make him out. He's at the top there. And then there's some kind of writing underneath him, but it might be his face and his body. Some of these pictures look better on a small screen than they do on a great big one. I can't do much about that, but again, you can look up on JPL and so on and see these objects for yourself. This is another possible face. I don't know if you can see it here. There's also one kind of below where that arrow points, a long, long face. I don't know if you can see the two eyes here, nose, mouth. Now, Hale Crater on Mars is a very interesting place in that we see lots of evidence of life in this particular crater. And up in the top left here is kind of a Z-like symbol and kind of an E-like symbol, and then some structures that don't seem normal. And then inside the crater itself, there's what seems to be structures as well. In any case, you can see these what appear to be structures. Now, we've asked NASA about it. They said, well, it's transmission errors. Now, that in any case, when pixels are transmitted, they can take on this square form or whatever. Jay Skipper and a Danish fellow did this work. And here's an interesting mining complex and a possible a temple. We see structures that look like they may be temples or churches or whatever, that there apparently was some kind of religion on Mars. And there's indication that they may have even brought it to Earth. Here's a picture picked up from Google Mars. You can get on your computer real easy. And it shows kind of like a road or tube structure with what may be actually structures on the side of these tubes. Not far away is this like city nest. These tubes will come from the poles, and then they'll kind of get together around a city area, and there'll be a whole bunch of them. Like we suspect that they may live within the tubes. If you think about it, the oxygen level is not very high on Mars. The atmosphere is not very strong, and that they could keep the atmosphere within these tubes, and of course the water and so on. But in any case, even though there's problems, they could live. Now, I've showed you mostly photos from space. Now we're going to go down to the ground with our rovers, mostly the Spirit rover, which landed in 2004. And where the cross is where it's landed. And it landed right near some of that moss and algae and so on. And this is the people that run the rovers, and they're explaining what's happening and so on. Now this is kind of an interesting picture because it shows the surface of Mars, but it also shows a blue sky. You don't normally get to see a blue sky, but that's what it really looks like. Here's the rover, and it landed in January, and it worked fine for about a week, and we noticed that it was picking up some objects that appeared like it might be going into an ancient or ruined city, and it went off the air for about a week. When it passed that significant area, it came back on and was broadcasting normally. But in any case, this is where the airbag bounced, and I don't know if you notice this object. I'll show you up close in a minute, and what could be water off here in the area. And kind of welcoming everybody was a kind of like a bunny, or a coral or whatever from possibly from ancient ocean. And here's that piece of rock close up, but it has a rectangular drilled hole in it. And it looks like it's part of something that maybe blew up or whatever, but in any case was part of a structure. And this is the area that it was in. This is the kind of picture that's normally shown. But every so often it'll pick up something interesting like this 1402 show. Now here's Donald Duck's there. Here's a picture taken by the rover of shell-like objects, silver dollar, whatever. And they actually dug into the ground and they found some things that look like scorpions. I don't know if you can see them at the end of the red line there. They're a little hard to pick out, but they're actually probably fossils, but it shows that life existed on Mars at one time, at least. Here's a close-up of the scorpion. It looks like he might be able to stick you as well. And maybe they came here. They're fairly similar to ours. This is kind of an interesting picture because the rover's going along and it's taking a picture of this object here. And we'll say this is, slide 1, and here's slide 2. And the next picture, it grew some like crab pincers. Now, I was told that it didn't really grow them or it didn't really move, that it was just a change in the position of the rover, but I thought it was significant. There's objects that look like bears or squirrels. I don't know. I doubt if they really are, but they may be fossils. Here's like a lizard or an alligator. Now, these are all taken by the rovers as they go along the surface of Mars. And when they dig down a little bit in these ancient ocean areas, they find crinoids. Now, crinoids are like lilies on Earth, sea lilies on Earth. And on the left there is the actual Earth sea lily, and on the, I guess it's, you're right, is the one on Mars, which would indicate that they're very close in comparison, and again indicating that there's life on Mars, or at least there had been. Now this is kind of Twin Peaks area. As they're going past this area, I noticed this rock. It looked kind of interesting, so I brought it in closer. And this rock is interesting in that it has an E and a G, and over on the, I guess it's your right, a face kind of sticking out at you. And there's also a Y there. We'll show you it even closer. And I don't know if you can see the E here. And there's kind of a Y here and a G. And here's a face down here. Now, we were kind of questioning our own, are we seeing things that, other people don't see? I don't know hope you can see it. So my granddaughter was in school, and I said, would you take this picture into school, kind of show and tell, and see what the kids see? And I think they were 8th graders at the time, and they saw the E and the G and the Y, and they told me there's a lizard up here on the rock. I don't know if it's a real lizard or not, but in any case, the kids are faster than we are. Here's again the E, the Y, and the lizard, and the face on the right side there. The E's and the Y's and the Z's and so on show up time and time again. I'm not sure what they mean to Martians, but it's kind of like Kilroy was here or something. I don't know if you can see these. These are a little hard to see, but there's a couple faces on the rocks. Up here, there's a couple eyes and a nose and so on. Also here, that one in fact looks like Kilroy. It has ancient trilobites. I bought these. They're like 1 million years old or whatever, and you can get them on Earth. Apparently, you can get them buy them on Mars as well. If anybody goes there, they'll probably bring some back. This is another one of those interesting pictures in that the rover moves along very slowly, and it takes pictures as it goes of the ground, and it takes pictures of these, like shells or butterfly-like objects, and some are blueberries and so on. But in any case, it has this wing-like thing, and over here in this one, it disappeared, just in a matter of seconds or whatever. Here's a log, petrified log, shown by the rover. The letter C. Faces here are pretty much in the center, kind of ugly faces, but possibly a letter R, some more shells in the bottom right. 2 Ys. We find those letters pretty often. Here's like a hand. You don't find many rocks with fingers on them. P on the rock, and what's interesting is there's a rock on top of the pile on your right there, and we question how that rock got up there, and kind of a face off to the right here. This one is hard to see, but it is like a man, and the eyes are right in the middle. I don't know if you can see that. Some of them, the pictures, when they're blown up, they don't come out real clear. I don't know if you can see it very well, but there is a face there and a kind of a man. Here's the indication of explosion, kind of junk and a possible head down on the right-hand side there. It looks like metal or something thrown around. Here's a possible story from the time machine, kind of a statue type guy. One interesting thing is when the rovers are on the ground, the colors are clear, green, blue, and so on. When they're on Mars, they're all red, which would indicate that the coloring is being made into a red color for some reason, rather than its real colors. One of the great cities on Mars is the Inca city, which is very near the South Pole. You can see the square lines. Again, the tubes, probably with objects moving through them. Again, it's interesting that JPL named it the Inca City because they saw the significance and how close it looked to places on Earth. Here's another ruins in the lower part here. And a dog-like face. Apparently they have dogs on Mars. And there's a lot of controversy about this particular picture because some people feel that this came from Google Mars, and they feel that this is some kind of a base, an alien base, or maybe our base, but in any case it measures 700 by 100 feet. Again, we contacted JPL and they said that this was transmission error. So perhaps it is. They said it's very common. That's what transmission errors look like. So now you know. Now, part of the wild stuff about Mars is people claim, who are appear to be sane, lawyers and so on, like Andrew Basigo, who claims that he met Martians at Curtiss Wright Company in New Jersey in 1970. And we get that steady flow of people claiming that they've met Martians and that they exist. And we get some people like Laura Eisenhower who claims that was going to be sent to Mars. But these people seem to be, sane in every other way, except they have these stories about Martians. So I was wondering if some of these stories might be true. On Mars, we have open pit mining. Here's an example of the mine that you can see here as we move in closer. Again, this is a European Space Agency photo. You can see the mining parallel lines going across. We have a Spirit nav camera, shows a structure. This is on the ground, not far away. We have objects that look like faces, similar to the Mayan gods in Peru. And here's the Peruvian gods in Peru, but to show the similarity. Various faces, they're usually in the center of the picture, and they're a little difficult to see, but you normally see two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Here's another tube-like structure that just kind of stops, so to speak. In any case, they also have strange lights on Mars that will be shining down, and they'll have these bright lights, which is no, reason to be showing. That might be a reflection of the sun, but in any case, it's something very bright. Could be shining on metal or a mirror and creating it, or it's actual lights shining out. Again, one of these city nests, again with these 200-foot tubes. You may be able to see some structures inside the tubes. These are usually around point far south. Apparently they have to be near the water for the city to function. Now we're going to Mars with the Curiosity rover next year. It costs $2.5 billion, and they're going to land it in Gale Crater, where there's none of these things, which is rather curious. In any case, here's a mermaid type structure. Up close, it looks like a mermaid. Again, this is, I don't know if you can see this, but this is one of the structures in the, carved in the side of a mountain-like, and it has resemblance to Ramses. Can you see it from this?
Can we see the previous slide?
Okay. This is the mermaid. There's kind of like at the bottom, there's almost like a snake or something, and possibly writing over there on the side. I don't know if you can see that. But the mermaid is rather famous. You can go to Copenhagen and see her. But here it is on Mars. And the rovers pick up UFOs as well. They pick up UFOs in this, generally the cylinder-shaped UFOs. Here's a close-up of it, very similar to those picked up over Earth. So those UFOs may be coming from Mars to visit us on Earth. These are, by the way, about a mile long. Okay, here's some speculation about all of this. The faces on Mars look fairly human. They might be us, you know, 1 million years ago or so. The civilization may have ended as ours began about 3 million years ago, possibly at the time of Planet X's explosion. They may have known that it was going to happen. There may have been a crash of planets in space or something. But in any case, there's indications that they left Mars and came here, possibly on Noah's Ark. If you read Noah's Ark in the Bible and in many ancient scriptures, you'll find that they brought animals and men to Earth and floated on the flood. But maybe it was talking about bringing people from Mars. Again, it's speculation, but it's something that could have happened. So you've seen a couple hundred pictures. Now I'm asking you, what is your analysis? I don't know if I can see you that well, but how many feel that there's no life on Mars and agree with NASA? We better send them a line about this. How many feel that there's living microorganisms on Mars? And that Mars has vegetation? Mars has a past civilization? And Mars has a viable civilization today? Well, thank you for your time. We just got this in from Mars to confirm that there is life there. That's it. Well, thanks for coming, folks.